Hi, and thanks for watching Missouri Viewpoints, the program dedicated to the civil and informed discussion of the political, social, and economic issues that affect us all. I'm Mike Ferguson, and as always, we're coming to you from downtown Grandview and the Hard Bean Cafe. Now, for generations, one of the most controversial topics in our society is that of sexuality. What's too much? What's too little? And does the government have an interest in regulating it or protecting us from all or parts of it? My guest this week is Chuck Munson. He is from the Missouri-Kansas Free Speech Coalition. Chuck, thanks for coming to Grandview to be on this program.
Thanks for having me out.
Okay, now let's go ahead and give the viewers a little bit of background on what's going on. There's an organization called the National Coalition for the Protection of Children and Families, which has begun petition efforts all throughout the Kansas City metropolitan area to have grand juries seated to prosecute and put out of business businesses like adult XXX shops, strip clubs, even some stores in malls that sell material that they feel is obscene and objectionable. What is your reaction to that effort?
Well, I think my first reaction is, why now? What's the point? Things have changed a lot in terms of attitudes towards sexuality, in terms of like pornography. And the whole effort seems to me to be rather unusual in that they're targeting bricks and mortars stores where most people really don't even have access to pornography and sexual materials. It seems very chaotic, I guess you could say. They're going after strip clubs, like Priscilla's, the local the chain of erotic stores sells materials. Most people get their pornography, get their sexual materials from mail order, from the post office, from the internet, from cable TV. It just seems to be kind of odd. And also I think societal views about pornography have changed quite a bit. It's much more out in the open now, much more accepted.
Now, along those lines, I mean, obviously this is a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business, and we're not even really here to talk about that industry in particular, but the efforts to regulate it. Given how popular the materials obviously are, when I researched for this program, you and your group were the only ones I could find that were publicly taking a stand against this effort. Why do you think that is?
I think most people just don't take these efforts to restrict materials that seriously. I even have problems getting motivated. I feel very strongly about it because I've done activism against these groups for many years. I was active in the fight within the library profession back in 1999, 2000 against filtering in public libraries. It was a hot issue back then. These groups, including the National Coalition for the Protection of Children and Families, or whatever it's called, those sort of groups were active in trying to use libraries, trying to use public institutions to restrict access to these kinds of materials. Those efforts were successful to some extent, but they seem like they're always coming around again. And it seems like if somebody gets it up there, gets it into their head, they're going to go protect children and families by fighting the evil pornography.
Well, let me just kind of get more to the point. I don't go to porn shops. I don't go to strip clubs. I don't want my children seeing these materials. Why should I care if somebody prosecutes or tries to shut them down?
I think it's a matter of intellectual freedom, freedom of speech, what consenting adults do in the privacy of their own homes with other consenting adults. I don't see that any of this stuff, for the most part, is dangerous to your family or to your children. This is something that has to do with human sexuality. What turns people on, what they're interested in. For the most part, it's really out of sight for most children. If you look at what children are exposed to these days, I would be much more concerned about the Disney Channel and the products and lifestyle it sells than pornography. You really have to go out of your way to see pornography on the internet. I would think now that younger kids, mostly teenagers, probably run across it much more easier than we would have back in our younger days. But I don't really know that it's really traumatized anybody. That's been a point of contention between the different groups on this issue is what kind of effects this material have on children.
Let's talk about some of those effects. Now, people of a variety of different political viewpoints and even religious viewpoints agree in many cases that pornography objectifies and demeans women and even increasingly children. Now, do you agree with this concern, and why shouldn't there be some limits on personal freedom if this is a concern?
Well, I don't agree with that take. I think that the old argument that pornography objectifies women really kind of is a bad argument against pornography. It really kind of ignores the complexity of human sexuality. It's not even really speaking to the whole issue of free speech and free access to materials. It's basically using the state in most cases, trying to get the state or the government to limit adults' access to this genre, as I always refer to it. A lot of people refer to it as the pornography industry, the pornography industrial complex. I mean, I think it's a genre. It's like restricting access to violent movies or rap or country western songs. There's a lot of objectionable materials based on your viewpoint. I see some things as objectionable that other people think is fine.
Okay, now, let's take this down to a local level and the local government's involvement, because that's really what we're talking about here in the Kansas City area right now, although they are making some statewide efforts as well. If many people, or even a majority of people in a community object to adult businesses, object to any kind of businesses, should they have a right to set a community standard of decency and say, not in our community if we don't want it?
I have two answers to that general argument. First of all, there is no community objection to this material. These campaigns, such as the one in Kansas that's impaneled a grand jury, has had no groundswell of support. There are not thousands of people jumping on the bandwagon to ban, to close down these businesses. These are few individuals who have connections with national organizations that feel uncomfortable with pornography and want to restrict access. I also think that the whole point of community standards, I mean, how would you determine what community standards are? I mean, we're going to have a vote on this. Which community are we talking about? We're talking about Kansas, Mission, Kansas, Grandview, Missouri. And what happens to the rights of those few individuals, or most individuals in most cases, most communities, who want to have access to this material? I mean, you're using the state or the government to restrict access to something that most people see as free speech, even if they are feeling comfortable with it.
Okay, now we've got about 30 seconds left here. Many people say that from a cultural aspect, our society is just simply too sexually charged now. What's your reaction to this worry in about 20 seconds?
I would say that it's not sexually charged. It's more of using images to sell products. I think it's really, I don't see a lot of sex on TV. I see a lot of faux sexuality. Mm-hmm. I think it's more of an issue of what is being, how it's coming across on television in terms of advertising, or maybe like the sexuality of young kids. That kind of disturbs me too, but it's not really the pornography industry that's pushing that. It's Disney.
Okay. Chuck, thank you for being on the program. I wish we had more time to talk about this. Once again, thank you to the Hard Bean Cafe for giving us a place to hold these conversations. When you come to Grandview, come to the Hard Bean Cafe. Try the hazelnut cappuccino. We'll see you next week.